What's going on, everybody? So I'm back today because I'm talking about a film that was released in the 1980s that I had never seen before. And this is one that I see talked about in a lot of lists online as like the most extreme horror film ever made and the most violent, brutal, and unrelenting horror films. And I'm always interested to see those. And this movie was absolutely fantastic. It was streaming on the Criterion channel, and I know it's streaming on a couple other platforms. I believe it's on Shudder and a couple other places. But the movie I'm going to be talking about today is the 1986 film Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer is directed by John McNaughton. Henry likes to kill people in different ways each time. Henry shares an apartment with Otis. When Otis's sister comes to stay, we see both sides of Henry, the guy next door, and the serial killer. This movie is in a very similar vein to a movie I love a lot, the 1980s film Maniac, starring Joe Spinell. Very similar in the sense that you're seeing this absolutely insane person commit horrible atrocities, and you're seeing kind of the way they present themselves in public versus the way they are behind the scenes. And in Maniac, it's interesting because you get the double sides of Joe Spinell's character, where you see him when he's at his most violent and brutal, the way he talks, his mannerisms, and the way he presents himself when he's in public and socializing around people. With Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, most of the time you're seeing Henry in a setting where he has to present himself in a specific way other than when he's just around Otis. And the young woman in his apartment makes him act a very different way. And I absolutely loved this movie. I feel like it really kind of looks at the deranged mind of a serial killer in a way that like shows zero empathy. He puts on this facade of being able to understand human emotion and connect. And that's why Becky's character is introduced, where she comes in to visit Otis, who's her family member. She goes there, she's staying for a while. She's left her home. She has a daughter that she left with her grandmother. And she's really trying to get close to Henry because I feel like she just wants some form of compassion. But you know Henry is completely compassionless. And what's really interesting about the way this film shot, especially at the beginning, there are elements through the film where you get to see those heinous acts of violence that Henry commits, but for the most part at the beginning of the film we only see the aftermath, which I thought was a really interesting filmmaking technique, where you just see the dead body and you hear the sounds in the background and you just kind of feel how unsettling and awful that environment was. And I think that was a really unique method of storytelling. What really makes this film is Michael Rooker's performance, which is absolutely brilliant. He does such a great job of playing kind of just like off-putting to himself, just very quiet-natured. But when something happens that kind of triggers that psychopath inside of him, he just snaps. And from what it seems like in the film, a lot of it is triggered based on sex. It seems like that's really what triggers it, the violent nature inside of him. They do such a great job with the nuance behind it and just really making you see it through little actions rather than just expositional dialogue telling you why he is the way he is. And then Otis is like one of the most unhinged, awful characters I've ever seen in a film, where at the beginning you're like, oh, it's just these two guys living together. And then when he sort of gets introduced into the world of Henry's life, you just sort of see him unravel and like he becomes so deranged and awful. That's another fascinating element to the film as well, where it's like Henry has this embedded in him and it's like he's rubbing off on Otis in this way. And it's just a really fascinating character study. Obviously it's not for the faint of heart. It's very brutal. It does not pull the punches from the really disturbing things that it shows in the movie. And it all takes place in a very grimy Chicago. I think they do a really great job of like the city streets feel kind of cold and dark and awful, and like it just has this really gross setting that just kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire film. And I'm really glad I finally got around to watching this. I feel like it really is a brilliant piece of filmmaking, and it's a very challenging piece of filmmaking because the end leaves you feeling miserable and understanding like there are people in this world that exist that are like this, that are completely devoid of empathy and compassion, and that are just violent, brutal killers. And I think the way that the third act kind of plays out, they do a really great job with that. And this is a movie that if you've never seen, that if any of this subject matter seems interesting to you, you should 100% check out. So have you seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was insane. insane. It really took me by surprise. Very well done, and Michael Rooker gives probably one of the best performances of his career. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.